I never imagined the child I raised from scraped knees to driver's tests would one day stand over me, demanding I kneel to a woman who sharpened her tongue on my grief. After my husband, Robert, passed, I clung to family as my last anchor. I endured insults, silenced myself, and accepted humiliation, believing peace was worth the pain. But at my grandson's birthday, when she mocked my widowhood and twisted the memory of the man I loved, something inside me stopped bowing. My son thought I would apologize. Instead, I exposed the truth, the gold digger secret they both prayed would never surface. My name is Martha Ellington, I'm 64, and I once believed keeping peace was the highest expression of motherhood, even if that peace required swallowing humiliation. After losing my husband, grief softened me, made me willing to overlook small slights to avoid being alone. She noticed that vulnerability quickly. She commented on my clothes, my hair, my age, always disguised as jokes. He laughed, not realizing how deeply her words cut. I accepted it, thinking family harmony mattered more than pride. I brought gifts, helped at gatherings, and ignored the whispers. Every insult felt like a test I convinced myself I needed to pass. But grief doesn't turn cruelty into kindness. It only hides it until someone finally stops pretending. She had a way of making her cruelty look charming, like a performer who practiced condescension until it became applause worthy. In public, she was sugary sweet, showing off family photos and talking about how lucky she was. But once the door closed, the mask slipped. She commented on how I hovered too much, that I was stuck in the past, that my stories were boring. She framed herself as the modern, sophisticated woman who rescued my son from a clingy old mother. And the sad part, people believed her. She used subtle humiliation, smiles with daggers behind them. I convinced myself she was adjusting, that we'd find common ground, but her goal was never unity. It was dominance. She moved into his life quickly, calculating every step. From the moment they met, she latched onto his insecurities, his fear of inadequacy, his longing for validation. She praised him publicly, flattered him privately, and made herself indispensable. Within months, she reorganized his finances, redecorated his home, and alienated friends who questioned her intentions. I watched it unfold like a storm forming on the horizon, beautiful from a distance, destructive up close. He mistook control for devotion, and I stayed silent, afraid I'd be dismissed as the jealous mother-in-law. She created a narrative where she was the savior, and I was an obstacle. It was frightening how easily she rewrote reality. By the time I realized it, she had already taken center stage. She exploited his insecurities with surgical precision, his fear of failure, his lingering guilt over not being able to save his father, his constant need to prove himself. She played the supportive partner while planting seeds of doubt about the people who truly cared for him. She told him he deserved better than small-minded relatives, and that I was emotionally draining. Slowly, she isolated him, not with force but with persuasion. She convinced him independence meant cutting ties, and confidence meant ignoring advice. I watched him drift away, thinking he was making his own choices, when really she guided every step. It hurt, not because he changed, but because he couldn't see who benefited from that change. I had no idea how far she would take it. Family gatherings became carefully staged performances where love felt like an act and laughter sounded rehearsed. She dictated menus, seating arrangements, even conversations, always ensuring she remained the center of attention. I noticed her subtle digs, small comments masked as jokes while others missed them. My son, proud and eager to impress, parroted her opinions, unknowingly reinforcing her control. I brought desserts she discarded, stories she interrupted, memories she mocked. I tried to believe this phase would pass, but it deepened instead. Holidays became battlegrounds of politeness where every smile hid tension. I walked on eggshells, terrified of upsetting a balance that already felt fragile. I just wanted my family back, not perfect, just real. But she didn't want to be real. She wanted power. She pushed boundaries further each month, testing how far she could go before someone stopped her. She commented on my grief, implied I was milking sympathy, and once even compared my widowhood to attention-seeking. She rearranged my grandson's schedule without asking, refused gifts I offered, and criticized traditions I tried to uphold. My son defended her, believing her intentions were misunderstood. I wondered if I was overreacting, until I saw how she smiled afterward, satisfied. It wasn't insecurity driving her, it was triumph. She wanted to prove she could break me, and the terrible truth, I allowed her. I thought patience would earn respect. Instead, it taught her that cruelty had no consequences. I had no idea the breaking point was coming. The birthday invitation felt like hope, a chance to reconnect, to share memories, to feel included again. I spent days preparing a small speech about my grandson's milestones and a sweet memory of his grandfather. I chose a gift with care, baked his favorite cookies, and rehearsed words I hoped would bring smiles, not tears. I arrived with genuine excitement bubbling in my chest. For a moment, the decorations and balloons reminded me of happier times. Family gathered without tension, laughter unforced. I dared to believe maybe things were changing. I didn't know that behind her cordial smile lurked a plan to humiliate me. The stage was set not for celebration but for cruelty. And I was walking straight into it, the moment she leaned in and whispered those venomous words, mocking a dead man who once held our family together. The room didn't just blur, it cracked. The decorations, the candles, the laughter around us, all of it suddenly felt grotesque. She didn't shout, she didn't need to. The quiet cruelty of her insult was far more lethal than any public humiliation. For a second, the world froze and disbelief washed over me. I waited for anyone to notice. But she smiled sweetly afterward, as if her attack was a private joke. It wasn't impatience or anger that followed in my chest, it was heartbreak. And beneath that heartbreak, something else awakened. Resolve. The glass didn't leave my hand out of rage. It left out of instinct, like a drowning person gasping for air. The sharp shatter was the first honest sound in that suffocating silence. Gasps filled the room, and suddenly her performance mask slipped. Her eyes widened, not from pain, but from shock that I had finally broken the script she authored. In that single moment, the roles reversed. I was no longer the quiet widow she could bully with passive insults. I saw fear, not in her injury, but in losing control. She wanted tears and apologies, she wanted to be the victim. Instead, she got consequences. And for the first time, the audience realized the tension they kept ignoring. Before the glass even hit the floor, he was already rushing to her side. Not to understand what happened, not to ask why, but to shield her and condemn me. His voice trembled with rage, not because he was hurt, but because his illusion of a perfect family shattered. He didn't ask about the insult or acknowledge the venom behind her whisper. He didn't even consider that I might be reacting to something deeper than pettiness. In his eyes, she was fragile, delicate, and innocent, and I was the aggressor. The betrayal wasn't in his anger, it was in his blindness. He saw blood on her face, but ignored the wounds she carved into my heart long before this moment. When he pointed to the floor and ordered me to kneel, the room spun. It wasn't the words themselves, it was who they came from. The boy I raised, nursed, guided, celebrated, and protected was now demanding my submission as if I were an enemy. Kneeling wasn't about apology, it was about power. It was about proving loyalty to her, not respect for me. I saw it clearly for the first time. She didn't just want me silent, she wanted me beneath her. And he was ready to help her achieve it. The trust I spent decades building collapsed in that instant. A mother's heart can endure distance and disagreement, but never humiliation as currency. The silence that followed was suffocating. People stared, some in disbelief, others in discomfort, but no one intervened. A few guests turned away, pretending the scene wasn't happening. Others exchanged glances, silently judging, unsure of whose side to take. No one dared challenge her version of events. The birthday decorations suddenly felt like props in a cruel play. Children were ushered away, whispers spread through the crowd, and I felt the weight of dozens of eyes waiting for the climax. The tragedy wasn't just the insult or the demand to kneel. It was the silence of witnesses. At that moment, I realized cruelty thrives not because of villains, but because of cowards. As the room simmered with tension, she didn't look afraid. She looked victorious. Her lips curled into a smirk, subtle yet triumphant, as if she had orchestrated the entire scene. The glass, the gasp, the demand to kneel, it all fed her narrative. She expected me to crumble, cry, or beg. She wanted a spectacle. She wanted validation that she held power over me and by extension over the entire family. That smirk told me everything. She believed she had won. She believed my son would stand by her no matter what. She believed my silence was permanent. And seeing that confidence is what finally changed me. Tears were replaced by fire. Humiliation doesn't always break a person. Sometimes it clarifies them. Standing in that room, surrounded by people who refused to acknowledge what they just witnessed, I felt something shift. I realized that staying silent was not protecting my family, it was enabling its destruction. For the first time, I saw the truth. She thrived because I allowed her to. My passivity was her permission. Kneeling wouldn't have saved me dignity, it would have buried it. That demanded apology was the final straw. I didn't know exactly what my next step would be. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was the moment I stopped playing her game. After the party ended and the guests disappeared, I didn't collapse into regret. I sat in silence and replayed every moment of the past year. Patterns emerged. Small inconsistencies in her stories, unexplained expenses, sudden lifestyle changes. I remembered overhearing her phone calls about investments and noticing documents she hid whenever someone walked in. Pieces that once seemed isolated are now connected. My humiliation became motivation. I started talking to people she thought she had manipulated or discarded, old friends, coworkers, even neighbors. Their fragmented stories painted a disturbing picture. The cracks in her perfect persona widened. I realized she wasn't simply cruel, she was calculated. And it wasn't just emotional control she craved. It was financial. The deeper I looked, the clearer her intentions became. She didn't choose him out of love or compatibility, she chose access. Access to stability, respectability, and money. She targeted him because he was eager to please and terrified of abandonment. Her flattery wasn't affection, it was bait. She crafted a role that appealed to his insecurities, making herself indispensable. She positioned herself as a solution to every emotional wound while quietly steering him into isolation. It was painfully obvious. She married not for companionship, but for leverage. And I understood with horrifying clarity that I wasn't the only one she planned to control. The marriage itself was a transaction, and he was her investment. Counts I reviewed revealed debts dating back years, credit cards maxed, loans unpaid, even a repossessed car she never mentioned. She masked financial chaos behind designer labels and social media perfection. Worse, I found she used his credit for recent purchases, large ones. Appliances, vacations, even jewelry supposedly gifts from him. She had convinced him to sign documents without reading them, claiming they were routine. She wasn't destroying him emotionally, she was sinking him financially. Every signature he gave was another foothold for her dominance. It wasn't simply marriage manipulation, it was calculated sabotage. And once the money well ran dry, she planned to jump ship. I needed proof, and I knew exactly where to look next. Rumors about her past circulated quietly, dismissed as jealousy or gossip, but I took them seriously. An ex-coworker mentioned a mysterious breakup. A neighbor recalled police visits. An old landlord referenced unpaid rent. None of it was enough on its own. But when cross-checked, the stories aligned disturbingly well. I tracked down one man she dated, a charming entrepreneur she left after draining his savings. He didn't speak with anger, he spoke with exhaustion. He described the same pattern: affection, flattery, isolation, then control. She didn't just repeat mistakes, she repeated strategies. His testimony solidified what the rumors only hinted at. I wasn't building a theory, I was building a case. My mission shifted. Revenge lost its appeal. I didn't want to destroy her reputation, I wanted to restore his clarity. I wanted him to see the woman he defended, the woman he knelt beside instead of standing with me. Truth, not vengeance, became the objective. That meant patience. That meant evidence. I gathered documents, interviews, debt records, legal warnings. I didn't confront her. Instead, I waited. Because truth spoken without proof is dismissed as bitterness. But truth with proof, it's undeniable. She thought the glass shatter was the climax. It was only the beginning. I wasn't done. I was just getting started. I realized the same event she used to humiliate me could become the platform to expose her. The witnesses, the setting, the symbolism, it all aligned. That birthday wasn't just a party, it was a perfect audience. The moment emotions ran high, people paid attention. And there's power in timing. I rehearsed not apologies, but truth. She expected me to kneel. Instead, I prepared to stand. I didn't want violence or drama, I wanted clarity. The same place where she mocked grief would become the place where I shattered illusion, and I didn't have to raise my voice. Facts would speak louder. Words, when backed by evidence, become sharper than glass. I outlined every manipulation, every debt, every lie, not in a scream but in calm precision. I didn't accuse, I revealed. I didn't humiliate, I illuminated. Her strength depended on secrecy. Removing that secrecy was the blow she never saw coming. The power she used to silence me became the very tool I wielded against her. My speech wasn't emotional, it was strategic. She trapped herself by underestimating me, and when the moment came, I was ready, not with anger, but with truth. When I finally spoke, the reaction was immediate. The room that once buzzed with celebration now echoed with gasps and stunned silence. People who had ignored her cruelty suddenly found themselves witnessing undeniable truth. I presented receipts, timelines, and testimonies, not dramatic accusations. The shock wasn't just because of her lies, but because of how meticulously she hid them behind charity events, social media smiles, and carefully curated perfection. She expected denial or emotional outburst from me, but instead I delivered calm facts. The audience she once controlled became witnesses to her downfall. Every gasp chipped away at her credibility. And for the first time I saw fear, not arrogance in her eyes. The murmurs turned into whispers when I revealed her infidelity, names, dates, locations. She prided herself on loyalty and devotion, but the truth was far from it. Her affairs weren't impulsive, they were strategic. Each partner offered something: money, influence, validation. She used relationships the same way she used my son, as stepping stones. The crowd's shock deepened as I shared screenshots and statements. She tried to interrupt, to fabricate explanations, but her voice trembled. She wasn't defending innocence, she was scrambling to salvage control. The betrayal wasn't just romantic, it was calculated. She didn't just cheat on him, she used him. And suddenly, the hero she pretended to be looked incredibly small. The forged prenup was the pivot point. When I held up the document, the room shifted again, this time from shock to outrage. She had convinced him it was standard paperwork, a formality to protect assets. In truth, she altered clauses, changed beneficiary terms, and added provisions that granted her full control in case of separation. It wasn't insurance, it was entrapment. The evidence was undeniable: handwriting discrepancies, missing legal seals, and altered signatures. She couldn't blame misunderstanding or ignorance. The forgery was intentional. My son's face was drained of color. For the first time, he saw her not as a misunderstood partner, but as someone who weaponized marriage for power. Her facade cracked. When I revealed the loans she had taken using his identity, the room's mood darkened. This wasn't emotional manipulation, it was financial violation. I laid out documents showing large purchases, unpaid balances, and transactions she signed electronically while claiming they were family expenses. She had been draining him quietly, preparing for a future where she could leave without consequence, while he was left with debt. He looked devastated, realizing he had willingly handed over trust she used as currency. The horror wasn't in the money, it was in realizing she saw him not as a partner, but as a resource, a means to an end. His silence spoke louder than words. Then came the threats: recorded messages, saved texts, even voicemails. She had warned former partners, coerced coworkers, and blackmailed acquaintances to maintain her image. She threatened custody if he left, hinted at false accusations, and reminded him she knew how to ruin lives. Those recordings shifted the room's reaction from shock to disgust. This wasn't a misunderstood woman, it was a manipulator who used fear as leverage. He listened, trembling, as her own voice betrayed her. Her carefully crafted persona, the loving wife, the charitable woman, crumbled. And at that moment, people finally understood she didn't want a family. She wanted control, and she was willing to destroy anyone in her path to get it. As the evidence mounted, he stepped forward, not to defend her, but to halt the emotional destruction. His voice cracked as he asked me to stop, not because he doubted me, but because he couldn't bear the weight of betrayal unfolding publicly. The realization that he had enabled her manipulation, unknowingly but willingly, hit him harder than the revelations themselves. He begged for privacy, for time to process, for space away from the witnesses. His pride had shattered. The illusion he clung to disappeared, and the consequences stood exposed. This confrontation wasn't just her downfall, it was his awakening. He didn't fall to his knees, but he did fall in understanding. When she realized control was slipping, the last layer of her mask came off. The calm, polished woman vanished. In her place emerged someone desperate, enraged, and unfiltered. She lashed out not at me but at him, accusing him of ingratitude, weakness, and betrayal. The audience saw her true self, a woman who loved power, not people. She blamed everyone but herself: parents, exes, society. Her voice rose, her composure broke, and tears of rage, not sorrow, revealed the entitlement beneath. She wasn't devastated by the truth. She was devastated by losing dominance. And in that moment, her downfall became undeniable, not because of my words, but because she exposed herself. And just when everyone thought the damage was done, there was still one final turn left in this story. Like I'm asking you to subscribe, you know something big is coming next. He didn't shout or argue. He simply fell apart in the most silent, heartbreaking way a person can. His hands trembled as the reality of everything he defended came crashing down. He sat alone in his car after the party, staring at the steering wheel, unable to turn the key. The truth wasn't just betrayal, it was self-realization. He had humiliated his own mother, protected a lie, and sacrificed relationships for someone who saw him as a tool. The guilt swallowed him whole. The anger wasn't directed outward, but inward. That night he didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He just replayed moments he ignored, signs he dismissed, and warnings he silenced. Her downfall didn't come with sirens or scandals. It came with abandonment. The same friends who praised her sophistication slowly stopped answering calls. Her parents, once enablers, distanced themselves when they realized protecting her meant enabling a crime. Social circles she admired began treating her like an inconvenience rather than an asset. Invitations vanished. Collaborations dissolved. The spotlight she craved so desperately grew cold. She tried to spin narratives, playing the victim, but people had seen too much. Lies had lost their charm. And the most painful consequence for her wasn't poverty or isolation. It was insignificant. She was no longer feared. She was no longer adored. She was irrelevant. He sought help not out of weakness, but out of survival. Therapy wasn't a punishment, it was a lifeline. He needed to understand how manipulation blinded him, why validation mattered more than judgment, and how fear disguised itself as loyalty. Sessions forced him to confront uncomfortable truths. He made choices, not accidents. He ignored signs, not by accident, but by preference. Accountability became part of healing. He apologized to people he pushed away, including neighbors, relatives, and colleagues. He didn't beg, he owned his actions. Slowly, he rebuilt confidence, not the ego driven confidence she fed, but the grounded confidence that grows from acknowledging mistakes rather than denying them. Their separation wasn't cinematic. No screaming, no dramatic exits, just exhaustion. Papers were signed, keys exchanged, belongings divided. She didn't fight to stay, she only fought to save face. Leaving meant losing benefits, control, and status. When the door closed behind her, the silence that followed wasn't empty, it was peaceful. He didn't chase her. He didn't negotiate. For the first time, he chose himself, not the person he wished she was. Healing began the moment distance became real. He moved into a smaller space, not to punish himself, but to rebuild from scratch, without luxury, without image, without her shadow dictating every decision. He didn't come seeking sympathy. He came seeking redemption. When he knocked at my door, his posture wasn't defensive, it was humble. He admitted his blindness, his pride, and the pain he caused. He didn't justify kneeling demands or dismissive words. He acknowledged them with full weight. His apology wasn't poetic, it was raw. I listened not as a victim, but as a mother whose heart had been broken and slowly mended. Forgiveness wasn't instant. It required acknowledgement, understanding, and genuine remorse. But in that moment, we rebuilt something, not old familiarity, but new trust. He realized forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it allows a future. We agreed on something crucial. Forgiveness without boundaries becomes repetition. So we rebuilt not with dependency, but respect. Weekly dinners instead of constant obligations. Honest conversations instead of assumptions. No blind loyalty. No emotional blackmail. He learned to protect his space. I learned to protect mine. He didn't expect gratitude for small gestures. I didn't expect perfection. We finally understood that love isn't proven by sacrifice, it's strengthened by limits. And the healthiest relationships aren't ones without conflict, but ones where conflict doesn't become controlled. For the first time, we had a relationship based on clarity, not fear or obligation. In the end, dignity wasn't reclaimed through revenge, it was reclaimed through truth. I didn't kneel. I didn't apologize. I stood not to destroy, but to defend my worth. She lost control. He found clarity. And I rediscovered a voice I buried for far too long. I learned that silence isn't peace when it comes at the cost of self-respect. I learned that motherhood isn't obedience and age isn't weakness. The family didn't return to what it once was. It evolved, imperfect but honest. And the one thing I gained above all was something she could never take: the strength to stand, even when everyone expected me to fall.